I want to walk you through my process of painting this gouache portrait, and I'm going to do something a bit different in this video, which is to do just one portrait and walk through my every step. And my hope is that by following along, you'll be able to find some useful takeaways and apply them to painting your own portraits. And in case you'd like to follow along with this specific portrait, I've also linked the photo that I'm using below. I'm using a dark gouache color, so in this case purple mixed with white, and if you're starting with gouache you literally need just 2 tubes of paint and you can do so much with it. And I always start these portraits with a guiding sketch. It's never super detailed, but I try to make it accurate anatomically by using the Loomis method. And I learned how to draw faces first by just copying photos freehand, but then I realized there was too much room for error, and after copying the portrait I'd look at it and it was sometimes a bit off, and I needed some sort of structure to build the face to at least help me get the features in the place that I wanted it to be. And I'll link the exact videos that taught me the Loomis method below, but as you can see, the sketch is super basic, but this will help me with the initial painting layer. And before we jump into the painting process, I just want to thank the sponsor of this video, Anna Luisa, who sent me this gorgeous jewellery for Mother's Day. And when they told me about their Mother's Day campaign, I was so excited because I love any excuse to celebrate my mum. All the jewellery I picked out reminded me of her in some kind of way. She's someone that grounds me a lot, so anything that symbolises nature, like butterflies or flowers, the sun, all those beautiful, delicate nature things just remind me of her so much. She is the person that taught me and teaches me to look for the beauty around me, and I actually do art because of her. Like, she truly shaped my path into art and is also the reason why I embrace painting pretty and cute things, because she taught me to unapologetically make the art that I like. I miss her so much because we live in different countries right now, but I'm sending her this beautiful sun necklace in the mail because it's so her, and she really is the brightest star in my life. I miss her so much. I'm so excited for her to receive this. Mother's Day is on a different day where she lives, but she's going to be so surprised when she gets this if she doesn't watch the video before. If you want to check out their jewellery, Ana Luisa's Mother's Day sale they're having, as well as my jewellery picks, you can click on my link in the description box. And thank you again so much, Ana Luisa, for sponsoring this video. Okay, now let's get into the painting process. Now, there is a reason I didn't call this a tutorial, because I feel like my process for painting portraits is not linear, so I can't say follow ABC step and you will get this result, but what I can do is I can show you the steps in my process which you can follow and kind of add your own flair to, and you'll see what I mean in a bit. My painting process with gouache uses layers. So I start with a fairly watered down consistency paint and I start mapping out where the midtones are. And the midtones are not the lightest or the darkest areas, but those that fall in between. So starting with a fairly light tone of white mixed with a bit of purple, and then working my way to darker midtones. And as you can see, I'm kind of doing this patchwork of colors. I lay down different shapes of the face. You're going to see me jump around a bit, and I do this because I let areas dry. So here I move on to the hair and I lay down a darker wash of purple, and I'm letting the photo guide me with where I'm seeing dark and light. And I really want to emphasize that the process isn't linear. So I tend to jump around, and the jumping around not only allows for the paint to dry, as I said, but it also guides the process, as I'm able to see what areas need to go lighter or darker comparatively as I lay down the paint. For example, putting in some of the darker washes of hair guides me in knowing how dark or light the areas of the face next to the hairline need to be, if that makes sense. So if I hadn't put in the hair or some of the darker features like the eyes, I could risk going either too dark or too light in other areas of the face. So it's a bit of a dance because I keep building and adjusting, and that's the beauty of gouache. It allows you to build and blend, and also because it does color shift when it dries, you kind of have to keep adjusting until you hit the spot. You're going to see me build on the same areas 3 or 4 times, and this is just part of the process. It would be impossible for me to go in just once with the perfect color and feel like the area is done. This process allows for shaping and pushing and pulling, which kind of reminds me a bit of sculpting. Actually, coincidentally, this person in this photo is a Native American visual artist named Roxanne Swensel, and she does sculpture, really cool sculpture, and I was so glad to stumble across her work. So with painting portraits with gouache for practice, I tend to use Pinterest, and I know this can be a bit iffy just because sometimes the photos on Pinterest don't have the sources and they're not really royalty-free images, but I think for practice it's okay, question mark, but it would be cool if the portraits on royalty-free sites gave a bit more. I feel like sometimes they're a bit stiff or contrived versus the variety of portraits you can find on Pinterest. But anyway, so while I was editing this footage, I was like, I need to find out who this is because it was just an image that was floating on different portrait reference boards. So yeah, that's how I found out about her art. So that's the thing, I love using photos where there's a clear source of light that is hitting the face and creating really cool shadows and shapes on the face, and I just find them so interesting to paint. And here I'm starting to build those lighter parts, and you'll see how this is just an initial layer, as I will get much lighter, but the process is gradual. As I said, I like to build it. I find it actually creates a lot more dimension too in the portrait. So here I began to add some definition to the features because I was entering that phase where everything looks a bit messy, and I wanted to put down some features to begin to define the face a bit. Even though I will go in later and actually go over these again and again, it's just that I was entering that phase where you want to quit because you can't see where it's going. So I had to put them down to start visualizing the face coming together. And as soon as I started to pick out those defining darker features, I realized that I needed to darken some of the shadows of the face. And so this is the kind of back and forth dance I was describing, that with every paint stroke, you start to better define what your next paint stroke should be. So the features allowed me to see that I needed to deepen some of those shadows on the face. The beauty of just using 2 colors is there is only 2 directions you can go in, either lighter or darker. So I think this is a really great way of learning value and how to build a face, and taking out that factor of having to decide between many colors. All you have to do is think, is this lighter or is this darker? And kind of go from there. Something I hope you can see in this footage is how wet gouache can actually look a little streaky, but as it dries, it does go quite opaque, so keep that in mind. And take a pause. If you feel like it's looking really messy, let it dry and come back to it, and you'll see that it actually doesn't look as streaky and kind of messy as you think once it dries. I think when starting out with gouache, it's really great to wait for it to dry completely between layers so that you can see what you're working with and how the color shifts and kind of build from there. And as you get used to the medium, you'll be able to work with it quicker and not have to wait for it to dry completely between every layer. But it's a good tip that helped me get used to how the paint would color shift and kind of behave. Here I'm going in and adding some more midtones to kind of blend out some of the harsher lines between areas. And I think harsh lines work really well for light and shadow areas, but sometimes you want a bit more of a gradual shift in some areas. So I'm going in and doing that now, blending out and adding some more midtones so there is that gradual shift. And here I begin to build out some of those areas that are being hit by the light. And I'll go in a couple of times to do this to really get that sunlight effect popping on the face. Something I hope you get from seeing my process is that I want you to feel good in your process too, wherever you are at in your painting and portrait journey. I know there are amazing resources out there and tutorials that do an incredible job of detailing what each step should look like to get a certain result. And I love those resources. I think they're super, super useful. I don't think this video is quite that. I wanted you to see more my process and how it can vary, and it's a bit more intuitive than prescriptive. I've done some other portrait videos before, and I'm sure I've approached building those portraits slightly differently, depending on the portrait, depending on the day, depending on my mood probably. But the goal is for you to see not only how I do this, but feel good in your process as well, because it has your flair and your approach and your way of processing, seeing a face and translating it into art. It's really great to want to improve and learn new techniques, obviously, like that is also the backbone of learning art, but I've also found that it's equally great to observe a painting process of another artist and understand why they make certain decisions, and also see their kind of unique approach of doing something, even if it may be different. So yeah, I hope that that's what you get from seeing this process video. Okay, so as you can see, now that the gouache is quite layered and more dry now, it looks more opaque and more blended. At this stage, I'm going in and adding those small brush strokes to add definition to the face. And at this point, I feel like my face is built out the way I want it, but I need to make those tweaks that start refining and defining and adding dimension to everything, which is really my favorite part of the process, because now I can see it's coming alive. Here I'm going in with my white and really trying to make those highlights pop. And I would really say to you that if you're adding these final highlights, make them really bright. Contrasting with the kind of darker gouache, they just really add dimension. That's why I love painting faces in sunlight. Now white can dry a bit darker, so I build on it a few times to get it really nice and opaque. And as you add more highlights, you realize some areas need to go a bit darker. So I'm going in and darkening some of those areas, adding a bit more definition, the fine lines, the little details that begin to really make the face come alive. Adding the lines and wrinkles and freckles is an important step that I recommend you don't skip, because this can really make the portrait come alive, as I said. And so here I'm just really enjoying adding those final details. It's so interesting seeing my process played back to me. I actually find editing these videos really useful because I see just how much I dance between the different layers and how my process of putting down a layer and thinking, okay, I'm done, but then seeing that, oh, this needs to go even darker or lighter, just like I'm doing here with the lips. I realized, okay, they need another kind of wash of darker color, which then made me realize, oh, the chin needs to go darker, and then certain other areas of the face and the hair and then the eyes. So you'll see me in this footage adjusting all of those things and adding darker gouache on top. And that's really what I was saying before about how it's more intuitive and less prescriptive. You're using the photo to guide you, but then every paintbrush stroke that you're putting down is informing you of the next. And that's the beauty of it too, that there's not kind of a rule of step by step. It's more that intuitive, I'm learning as I go along what I need to put down. Okay, here I'm almost done. I'm just adding those really tiny details, and I'm realizing I think I used the same brush for the whole painting. Does that ever happen to you, that you get so immersed that you're probably just washing and rewashing the same paintbrush but not changing it up? It just goes to show that oftentimes you don't need a wide array of paintbrushes. With one you can do so much. I hope this video was useful for you, or at least you took something from it. Please do let me know if it was useful, because I'd love to do more in-depth videos like this. Normally my videos are a bit quicker, a bit more sped up, and I go over multiple things, but I love doing this kind of deep dive into one portrait. So if that's useful, please do let me know. And thanks again, Louisa, for sponsoring this video. Please do check out my link for them below. It really does help me. And yeah, I'll see you in my next video. Bye.